Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Normally we visit with our next guest on Mondays, but there are some power issues and weather issues. And, well, honestly, I don't think they're done with power and weather issues down in Austin, Texas. But he's joining us anyway, braving the frozen tundra of Austin, Texas, to join us today. Our good friend of the show, it's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. Scott, good morning. How are you doing today?
Doing okay. It is a little like the aftermath of a hurricane here, Chad, and that's no exaggeration. Yesterday I spent some time driving around Austin, and I have to say this, and you have to stress this, and in Lubbock and up toward the Panhandle of West Texas, you'll have more experience with driving in the snow and ice than they do in Austin. But I have to tell people, you really need to have a four-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive, and you need to go under 15 miles an hour, please. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of problems. People spinning out, crashes, people stalled out, and things like that. Yesterday, I saw, and there's some of this going on again today, shortages of various things. People have obviously not prepared. They didn't take the warning seriously, and not everybody, of course, but you see a lot of these folks around the University of Texas campus. I saw some in South Austin who were lined up probably for hours. I saw long, long lines, people looking for food, people looking for gas. A lot of the gas stations didn't have fuel. And, the people who ran the stations, I'm just doing old school reporting, Chad, and checking it out. And people were telling me that run those stations, they weren't sure when they would get fuel again because, of course, bringing the fuel takes the trucks. The trucks have to drive on icy roads. That's going to take some time. So I think, folks in this area would be well advised. And, of course, in areas all across the state where they're having the same kinds of problems, major metro areas here in Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, down in San Antonio, and I talked with some folks down in the valley as well who were having problems. They should be rationing their food. They should be trying to stay in place if they can. But so many people without power at a time when it is so cold. The temperatures have come up a little bit. We're in the 30s today when it was in the 20s yesterday. So I guess people can break out the swimsuits and the sunscreen now. Those were the jokes. But no, it's just miserable right now, Chad, and it doesn't look like any signs of letting up anytime soon. We heard from Austin Energy this morning. Of course, that's the government-run energy provider here in Austin under the city's purview. And they were saying that, and they tweeted this out at about 7 o'clock this morning, that they were doing better on the outage situation, and the outages had gone back up because ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, is still asking for these rolling blackouts. But as anybody who has lived through the last few days would tell you, here in Austin or in any of those other places, it doesn't seem like rolling blackouts to us. These are just blackouts that have gone on for days and days.
Yeah, do you have power yet?
I do not have power at my home. This is the third day without power. I have access to an office here that I'm using, but I can use a phone here. The internet is very spotty. The cell service has been, as I think you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, cell service. I couldn't even get a phone call out from my house on Monday, and same was true on Tuesday. Must be having problems. I'm told there are problems with power getting to cell towers and the cell repeaters. And so, infrastructure is just really taking a beating here. And, of course, our electric grid being the main, problem, that we're not hardened against this kind of weather. I mean, we have a diverse, mix of fuel for our power in Texas. And that's a good thing. I was reading about a lot of this over the last couple of days. I didn't have a lot else to do, Chad, other than sit around and read. And the fact is that all of these different types of power, from different sources, have different ways of failing. Wind power can fail because of certain things. Natural gas can fail because of certain things. Because they fail in different ways, you want to have a robust mix of different fuels to choose from, and that can actually, help to stave off some of the worst statewide blackouts that we could see in this state. I know there are a lot of folks are finger pointing right now, saying it's the wind that is the problem. Doesn't seem to be, based on the numbers from the governor's office himself. He had sent out an advisory early on, saying, and this is the fact, that all forms power generation in this state that ERCOT relies on failed. Coal and also natural gas, wind as well. and the nuclear plant in South Texas went down as well, and they're trying to get that back online. So we've got a long way to go here, Chad, and when they're telling us, and I was able to figure out what ERCOT was telling lawmakers yesterday on a private conference call and in an email that they had sent to lawmakers that ERCOT had sent, they just didn't have a real estimate for when all this would be wrapped up. They would only say, quote, days, but not how many.
Yeah. Okay, because this is now going to become an issue, obviously, with the session. What do you think? What are you hearing from folks? And I know it's early in all of this, and people are still trying to wrap their minds around all of this. But is there any thought that anything's really going to change moving forward? Or are we just going to point fingers and maybe a few people on the ERCOT board are going to be forced to step down, and we'll talk about changes, but nothing really is going to be done?
Yeah, I think some heads are going to roll, but the question is going to be which ones, right? There's going to be a call for certain people to resign. The ERCOT board, you know that there was a lot of chatter over the last 24 hours about the fact that the chair of the board doesn't even live in Texas. And some of the other members of the board, in fact, one lives in Germany, the chairman lives in Michigan. Someone was joking yesterday, it's always the Michiganders who are really running everything when you don't know it. And you have, questions about that. There will, though, I think, be some pushback from those who would ask this question. The government agency that has oversight over at least on paper, has oversight over ERCOT is the Public Utilities Commission. The PUC board members are chosen by the governor. So it doesn't surprise me, Chad, that I haven't heard Governor Abbott bad-mouthing the PUC, but he has been saying that things need to change at ERCOT. One of the things that I think is a little confusing for folks on this, and it will probably allow, in the final analysis, will probably allow some people whose hands were not necessarily clean on this, it'll allow some people to get away with it because the way our system is set up is kind of confusing. You have all these different entities that are in charge of the way we get our power. But at the end of the day, we have seen this before. I mean, look at the fact that in 2011, it was in the same month, in February of 2011, we had rolling blackouts across Texas that were serious, not as serious as this. This is a 1 in 500 year event, I'm told, this kind of weather event. But in February of 2011, there were rolling blackouts across Texas, and there was a report, and I was just reading through it, and I've got it on my Twitter feed, at Scott Braddock, a report put out by a Republican-led Texas House committee that identified the problems as far as why that happened back in 2011. And as far as I can tell, and maybe I'll be corrected on this, Chad, they identified problems in that report, and I can't tell that state leadership did almost anything about it in the meantime. We've seen, continued deregulation of our, energy market in Texas. Think about the way tuition deregulation worked for, colleges and universities. Now you have a lot of conservatives who would like to see, maybe some of that rolled back. Same thing with this, I think maybe is possible moving forward. And there's going to be a lot of anger, I think, when they have this hearing coming up later this month, I believe on the 25th, but I'll double check that for you. Texas House hearing coming up. They're going to want to look for constructive answers here and to try to get some real information from the players who were involved. They can attempt to do that all day long, Chad, but I think the anger is still going to be there from Republican and Democratic lawmakers who are going to be looking at this. And at the end of the day, when you don't have power, when people are dying in their homes from either being too cold or from carbon monoxide poisoning, the politics should fade away and real answers should be found. And, we could try to get some solutions for this and make sure it never, ever happens again this way.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that at least this is going on during a session where, you've got lawmakers who are back in their districts right now. Maybe some of them are down in Austin, but you get a lot of them who are back in their districts and waiting for everything to restart down in Austin. They're probably hearing it from some of their constituents. If they aren't hearing it right now, they're eventually going to within the next several months.
No question, and we've heard stories about lawmakers sitting in their own homes without power, sitting in the dark, tapping out emails on their cell phones, if the cell phones work, to try to talk to constituents, try to talk to the agency players, try to talk to ERCOT, try to talk to the governor's office, et cetera. In fact, during that ERCOT conference call yesterday, I was told that several lawmakers were calling in from their cars because because the power was out in their homes and they were having to charge their phones that way just so they could listen into the call. So this is real and right in front of lawmakers. There's nothing conceptual or, just philosophical or academic about any of this. This is a real-world problem, and they're going to have to come up with some real-world answers and solutions.
The governor has seemed pretty angry at ERCOT. Is this a real anger, or is this kind of putting on a show as well in political theater?
Well, he's angry at ERCOT. He's also angry at the wind energy industry, which, again, the wind power production is such a small piece, the wind and solar, such a small slice of what we're talking about with ERCOT. The vast majority of the problem, and this is just borne out by the numbers, there's nothing political, the vast majority of the problem is the fact that we have natural gas lines that are frozen, and we're not able to get power that way. It's not a knock on any of those things, actually. The fact is that we just don't have an energy grid that's hardened against this kind of weather. Chad, in the North Sea, they have wind turbines that they run just fine, right? But that's because, and there's a cost-benefit analysis thing going on here. It costs millions more dollars to, make sure that those natural gas lines don't freeze, millions more dollars to make sure that wind turbines don't freeze and other facilities don't freeze as well. But do you really want to spend that kind of money if you're a power generating company? You're going to put that kind of investment into it in a place where this kind of freeze almost never happens. And in fact, a freeze exactly like this has not happened before. As somebody joked just
and
the
that's
other day,
why we probably won't see much change.
That's probably right. As somebody said the other day, I'd like to go back to living in precedented times, please. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But you're right. I mean, it costs money. We had someone who called in earlier who had said, what is this going to take for some real changes to be made to the ERCOT grid? And it's either you're going to have to deal with prices that skyrocket because they're not going to just they're going to pass it on to the consumer. That's what you're going to have to deal with. And is it worth the cost of quote unquote fixing everything? When this doesn't happen every year, this doesn't, you can even make the argument it doesn't happen every 5 to 10 years. This is, it doesn't happen very often where the Rio Grande Valley gets snow and gets freezing cold temperatures.
Yeah, as I mentioned, those rolling blackouts in 2011, that's 10 years ago. And it's sort of like
but that wasn't as bad as this.
It wasn't as bad as this, although it did help to identify some of these same problems. But it's the point I was going to make is sort of like the economy needing to be bailed out by the federal government gets to where it starts to happen every 10 years ago, or every 10 years we need some kind of a stimulus out of Washington to keep everything rolling right along. And do you really care about that when you're in the middle of that cycle? 5 years in between and everything seems just fine.
Yeah.
People tend to react to these crises, and then when things kind of go back to normal, they forget about it.
Yeah. Now we'll see. We'll see what happens. Again, I think that first meeting is going to be on the 25th, so we'll see what comes out of that. Scott, anything else going on as far as the session goes?
This is the main thing right now, and we should mention that Governor Abbott also made ERCOT reform an emergency item, for the legislature. He added to that list that he had put out previously, which also included, expanding broadband internet access and a few other things as well. I think this one, at least for right now, jumps right to the head of the pack as far as what lawmakers in both the House and Senate are going to be digging into. And hopefully they don't over-politicize it and they actually figure out what went on
here. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. The governor, I know he's mad at wind, and I know a lot of Republicans are mad at the wind industry right now. Hasn't it been the governor and some of these other Republicans who have pushed for some of these subsidies to continue and accepted awards from wind coalitions to push for expansion of wind energy in Texas?
They sure have, and I would repeat part of what I said, which is that that's a good thing. I think they're looking for a scapegoat right now when everything is terrible. I think the embodiment of this right now, Chad, would be the fact, and this might be controversial, and I hope you can still have guests on from TPPF, but I saw a lot of folks at the Texas Public Policy Foundation bad-mouthing wind energy. Wind energy proliferated under Governor Rick Perry, and they have a balcony named after Governor Perry at the TPPF building. So we're kind of blowing with the winds of the day right now as far as who we blame.
Scott, stay warm out there, and hopefully you get your power back soon. Hopefully a lot of Texans will get their power back soon. What are those who are able to work over it? And I know the work doesn't stop at Quorum Report, but what will you guys be working on today and in the future?
But we're continuing to dig into this and figure out exactly what's going on. I think we should also look more into what's happening with the Public Utilities Commission because, as I mentioned, the agency actually does have jurisdiction over ERCOT. And some more people are asking in Austin, were they at the agency, at the PUC, were they asleep at the switch? It's just a question right now, but I think it's one that's definitely going to be important, so we're digging into that for everybody as well.
All right. Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and stay warm.
I'll be warm, but I'll still be salty, Chad.
There you go. Exactly. That's what we like. Thank you, Scott. Have a great day. That's Scott Braddock, editor of QuorumReport.com.